Okay, so this is Introduction to the Nervous System, which is chapter 10 in the textbook. Objectives for this are right here. And this is really just to set you up so you start off A&P 2, hopefully with an understanding of how the nervous system is structured. All right, functions of the nervous system. The nervous system is, its job is to receive input. So we take in some sensory information, and that input can be internal or external. So the internal input is you're hungry, or you feel sick, um, or you sense something internally. And external input would be things we collect from our environment. So we feel something on our skin, or we see something, we hear something. Then we integrate that information. So integrating the information is going to happen in the brain, and this is where we take in all of the information. So what do we see and feel and hear, what's going on inside of our bodies, and also takes into account our instincts and our memories and our experiences. And then from taking in those signals, we form a response. And that response is set out through motor output, and when it goes to some effector organ, so maybe a muscle or a gland. So in this example over here, we have this particularly short gentleman who's also bald, and it appears that he's thirsty. So he sees the water, and we're making the assumption that he's thirsty. So his body has told him that he's thirsty. He sees water, and those are the two pieces of input. He's thirsty and he sees water. Integration happens here in the brain where, hey, he remembers that he likes water. He's had water in the past. So the output is he sends a signal out to his muscles to pick the water up and bring it to his mouth. The structure of the nervous system. The nervous system is broken down into, general structure. The CNS, so the central nervous system, and that's the brain and spinal cord. And then we have the PNS, which is the peripheral nervous system. Okay, peripheral nervous system, and that's all the other nerves in the body that are not in this brain and spinal cord. Cells of the nervous system, you have neurons. Neurons' job are just to carry nervous signals. So these carry the actual electrochemical signal. And the neuroglia support the neurons. Okay, so they help provide nourishment or take care of them in other ways, protect them. This is this is the little flow chart shows the breakdown of the nervous system. So we've got the actual nervous system, the whole nervous system. It's broken down in the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is the sensory nervous system and the motor nervous system. So the peripheral is made up of sensory and motor. Sensory sends signals to the PNS, and the motor carries signals away. And then the motor nervous system is broken down into two subsections. The somatic, which is the voluntary nervous system. Think of skeletal muscles. Okay. Things that we can control consciously. And then the autonomic. And then the autonomic is things that are under unconscious control. And that's broken down into the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. These sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems function in our fight or flight. Okay, so both of those function in fight or flight. Okay, this is the, so would be like atypical neuron, like a couple of neurons. And the different parts here, it's a physical breakdown we're going to look at. The different parts are, we've got let's just start with the cell body. So this is the cell body right here. So cell body is like the cell body of any other cell. It has a nucleus, it has mitochondria, it has other organelles. So the cell body is just the part you would find in any other cells. And then the dendrites here, all these dendrites, these receive signals into the cell body. So these receive signals from somewhere else and send them to the cell body. And then the axons send signals away from the cell body. So this one right here is this one's axon, is neuron 2's axon. So this axon sends signals away from the cell body. So information is collected in dendrites, sent to the cell body, and then the cell body sends that information out through an axon. These cells here in red, these are specialized cells called Schwann cells that surround some axons. We'll talk about those now. Functional classification of neurons. Sensory neurons are also called afferent, and they send signals to the CNS. Motor neurons are also called efferent, and they send signals to the PNS, so from the CNS. And then the interneurons are how signals are transferred within the central nervous system. So it's from interneurons, carry signals from one neuron to another. Structural classifications of neurons continued. Well, we've got bipolar neurons. And the bipolar neurons have a cell body with a dendrite and an axon. Bipolar neurons we find in special senses like the eyes, ears, and nose. Unipolar have a cell body with a branched axon. And these are like the cell bodies in the peripheral nervous system. Multipolar, like the ones we just looked at, and these have a cell body with an axon and then many dendrites. And that's the primary, these multipolar ones are the primary neuron in the central nervous system. We talked about the types of neuroglial cells. These first two are found in the PNS. So Schwann cells produce myelin sheaths. That surround axons in the PNS. Okay, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. These satellite cells, also found in the PNS, these help to support ganglia. In the PNS. And ganglia are just masses of neurons that are in the PNS. Oligodendrocytes, these form myelin in the CNS. These form the myelin sheaths in the CNS. So they're like the Schwann cells of the CNS. Microglia, these primarily function during inflammation in the CNS. So maybe during meningococcal disease, something like that. And they break down cellular waste and bacteria. So they break down cellular waste and bacteria. Okay. Astrocytes provide nourishment to the neurons in the CNS. Okay. And the epididymal cells line the central canal, the spinal canal, and the spinal canal, or in the spinal cord, sorry. Okay, ventricles in the brain, and the choroid plexuses. Plexuses. Okay. And their function is to adjust the composition of the cerebrospinal fluid. So they adjust composition of cerebrospinal fluid, CSF. So this is that Schwann cell we talked about. The Schwann cell is made of lipids. Or the Schwann cells make the myelin sheath, and they're made of these lipids. And it helps to speed up this signal, the nervous signal, as it passes down the neurons. Because with the Schwann cell there, the signal can actually, it's called saltatory conduction. But the signal normally has to travel down the entire axon, which happens very quickly. But with a Schwann cell, it can actually it's almost like skipping over those pieces. Because in between each Schwann cell is a small piece of axon that is exposed, and that piece is called the node of Ranvier. Okay, and these Schwann cells have these nodes of Ranvier in there, so the signal can just skip over. So it's, instead of just going along like this, it can actually almost skip over and go much faster. So let's see if we can see a picture of that. And this is what it looks like. So you have with this unmyelinated neuron, you can see that the signal happens much faster up here. Obviously, this is exaggerated. Okay. All right. So you can take a look at that too if you need to. Okay. Axonal regeneration. This mainly occurs in the PNS, in the peripheral nervous system, and then in myelinated axons. And this happens because the myelinated axon helps to maintain a kind of template for this nerve to regrow. So the nerve can actually regrow through there. And it happens because those nerves have, the neuroglia, I should say, have nerve growth factors. So when this is severed, it can regrow. It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens a lot. Okay, so this is how a nervous signal actually moves. So I'm actually going to stop here and have a second one. So we'll pick up on the second one in a second.